Greetings. Greetings from the side of the road. This is Freak Phil. There's something I heard earlier that I think is just kind of hilarious. Apparently, the Southern Poverty Law Center has been caught that they have been funding most of the so-called white right-wing extremists. Like, I want to get the names. I want to know the names of who they were paying. Because you remember all those events that happened, like guys like Richard Spencer or Nick Fuentes, or like some random tool sheds, or the KKK just magically showed up at a protest. And what this comes down to is, imagine for a second if people just got together. Because I think we were coming along pretty good in the late 90s, early 2000s. It's almost like the race wars had to happen so nothing could improve. And why did it happen? It's Freedom Phil, like, subscribe. Let's get into it. And hey, turn up the video speed. The reason I say that is because, dude, you're watching videos at regular speed. What the fuck you doing with your life? You gotta turn that up. Anyways, let's get into it. Like, subscribe. I think it's hilarious. I mean, it's like something Alex Jones said years ago. He's like, yeah, basically the government's funding these racial groups and all this crap, basically to keep these issues going. And one of the examples of how the government, the Democrats, knew they screwed up was when gay marriage became legal, they realized they screwed up because they won such a great victory there that now what are you fighting for? So it's always about the next battle. It's always about the next thing. It's always about the next, faux racism sort of thing. But what if most of the things that you think are happening were really just manufactured fucking bullshit? Think about that for a second. What if guys like Richard Spencer back in the day and the Tiki Torch March, or random times the KKK showed up? What if it was all being funded, like the Southern Poverty Law Center? And what about all these people with all this money, all this government like Somali money? You start putting together, somebody's getting millions of dollars. Why the fuck would you just give some like random Somali or some other thing, some other person from Armenia, all this money? It can't just be for the voting bloc. You can give people a lot less. It's a way to funnel money to dark groups in order to fund fake actors. Now, people say, why would this happen? By the way, like, subscribe. The more people are coming together, the more we start looking at the things we have in common. Like, sometimes it's the problems we have in common. Like, you want to live in a safe community. You want to have good schools for your children. You want to have, a future where you got a job and you're going to be able to retire at a reasonable age. Now imagine for a second the system that we got now is made to do a lot of that in the opposite direction. Because for a minute, what if we had to get better treatment from, your owners? Much like George Carlin said, you don't have the freedom of choice, you have owners. And they give you this illusion of choices. He was pointing out how many major oil companies existed at one point, and then there's 2 or 3 now. I mean, you got 17 options of bagels, but you got how many options of, how to make money and all this other shit. He was right. George Carlin was right about that. And he was right when he said these two parties where they do collusion, they come together. In fact, he says you don't even need collusion. When groups of people's interests all come together and they have the same interests, like they go to the same universities, they go to the same country clubs, and they're all part of the 1%. When these people come together, it's in their best interest that they both work together towards something. Now imagine for a second, you saw Occupy Wall Street way back in the day. And in Occupy Wall Street, people were really pissed off that the business class, the 1%, were getting bailed out. And they said, what the fuck? Where's our piece of the pie? I think that scared the shit out of both Democrats and Republicans, particularly Democrats. Because you start to think, why would the Southern Poverty Law Center be funding all these fake racist issues? Ginned up fake shit. And the answer is, if you're distracted with a racial issue, if you got the situation where, let's just say, whites are a little, they don't really want to deal with black people because of potential racial issues. And blacks think white people are out to get them. Those people aren't going to come together. They're not going to come together as a unified force and say, hey, what? We want better schools, safer streets. And if you think I'm wrong about this, take a goddamn good look at a Democrat city. Are the streets in Democrat cities cleaner and safer than they were in the 60s? Go back to the 50s and the 60s. Even go back to the fucking 90s. Is friggin' San Francisco a nicer place today than it was in the 90s? Now imagine you got a track record of failing epically on all the issues. The schools are shit in these inner city areas. The crime is horrible. Like you haven't improved a lot of black folks' lives in these cities. Okay, were they on Section 8 back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s and 90s? How many people in these families are perpetually on Section 8? Sometimes I think the whole rap culture, the hood culture, it was basically designed to hold black people down. I mean, think about it for a second. Look at the type of message you can't get out of country music. Yeah, there's a little bit of partying and there's some breakup songs, and every damn music has breakup songs. But generally it's, I love my family, God first, family, love America. Look at the difference in message that different groups are getting. Then look at rap music. You know, like maybe it's some hard stories about, you know, what we grew up in, mama, and, you know, the drugs and all the other bullshit. But, you know, this guy looked at my shoes wrong, gonna blast him. You look at some of these videos where some dude like cuts another dude in line. He's like, hey man, you cut me in line. And this dude just goes off like a female talking about how he's gonna pop him. Is that a better world than you had in the 1960s? And you turn on PBS and they're always showing you, oh my God, Jim Crow, not telling you that was the Democrats. Oh my God, the KKK, also the Democrats. White supremacy, mostly the Democrats, but won't lie, there were some Republicans that had the same attitude. They'll sit there and talk about the legacy of slavery or some other minority group, and they'll basically be America bad, we got to fix it. But these people have been telling you how they're going to build a utopia. Now, let me ask you a question about the Democrat cities. Has it been over 30, 40, 50 years of Democrat rule in some of these cities? Are things getting better? Now, imagine in the late 90s and early 2000s, people were becoming more conscious. And I mean that. I mean more conscious. They were like, you know, people were getting together. There might have been a racial, colorful joke occasionally. If you ever were a gamer, people would say some wild shit. But you go back and look at the comedians. And for the most part, the whole like political correctness, that was really only something against white people. Black folks could say whatever the fuck they wanted. Latinos could say pretty much whatever they wanted. It was really only something against white folks. But you hypertize that shit under this last 15 years of the wokerati walking around saying, oh my God, we're so offended. You guys don't remember like shit like Jesse Smollett. You guys remember that shit? Oh my God, there's these racist MAGA Republicans. And it turned out to be a couple guys that were like from like some African country. And they even outed him. Did Jesse Smollett get time? And did Jesse Smollett get terrorism charges for that? Because you know he was trying to gin up a race war. What happened to him? Nothing. You look at guys like Richard Spencer, the so-called alt-right. Isn't it funny how the so-called alt-right guy was getting interviews on major news platforms? Doesn't that seem a little weird? What about this Nick Spencer guy? Or Nick, what is his name? Nick Fuentes. Doesn't it seem a little weird that guy gets as much press as he gets? Almost like it's a fucking op, a glowy. No, they need. And then you even look on the black side. Who was the guy who did the song Wash Your Ass? Tariq Nasheed. That's who the motherfucker was. We was kings. You know, like the black Israelites, like losing their minds and shit. You start adding that up for a second. You start thinking about it, and you're like, it's almost like there's certain groups have been allowed. And you want to know how you can tell they're feds? Because when they say all the shit they're saying, they don't get canceled. They don't get banned. You know what they get? They get millions of dollars. They get promoted. They go on speaking tours. It's almost like the people they want to lead you, the Judas goats. How many of you know what a Judas goat is? See, sometimes you got a problem at a slaughterhouse of getting the sheep to walk down the ramp into the slaughterhouse. So what they do is they get what's called a Judas goat. This goat is specially trained, and they keep that Judas goat around to walk in the front of the goats and the sheep. So the other sheep will feel comfortable. Okay, we're following this other animal. And they walk right into the slaughterhouse. And then they take the Judas goat out and just wait for the next herd. And that Judas goat just keeps on walking the sheep in that don't know any better. Now, would it surprise me if groups like Southern Poverty Law Center and your own government, Barack Obama, knew they were losing in the cities? Sure, the cities are generally Democrat, elitist. Now, notice how they went from the working man's party back during the late 90s, early 2000s to Silicon Valley elitist party. But what was Silicon Valley really doing? What was Silicon Valley really doing for the average person living in the hood, living in a trailer park? Now just think about that for a second. No, they became an elitist party. And the problem with being an elitist party is sooner or later, the poor people look around and are like, man, shit ain't getting better. Why are we still voting for these people? Why are we still voting for them? And the answer for that is, we're voting for them because maybe we get benefits. Or maybe we just always voted for them. But then what if you need people to vote? You got to have a racial issue. By the way, that black high school student that murdered that white kid, what was his name? That trial still hasn't happened. Isn't that weird? Isn't it weird that after all this time, this trial magically hasn't happened? Stabbed a kid in the heart. Dude bled out next to his twin brother. Bunch of black activists, shilling for, like, he got $500,000 and they don't even know where the money is at this point for his defense. And I ain't heard shit about that trial. Now, what do you want to bet that trial is going to come on right during the midterms? And they're going to say, oh, it's white supremacy trying to put them in jail. They have to manufacture issues to win your vote at this point. Because after, since the 60s? Since the welfare expansion in the 60s and the civil rights issue in the 60s, what exactly have the Democrats done for minorities? Like, you could argue Asians have done a lot of things for Asians. Latinos, they've had a hard struggle as well. But as far as Black America, what have the Democrats really done for you other than giving you a welfare check and a white supremacy boogeyman? Think about it. Like, really, sit back and think about it. And if we can't find wolves, what need for the shepherd? So that's where you get in these government agencies. And then you got Southern Poverty Law Center literally funneling money through different channels to hire people to act like white supremacists, to act like KKK, to act like the Aryan Nation. And by the way, if you're going to say that the Aryan Nation is a hate group, which they are, then can't you say these gangs that are murdering people in the cities are a hate group as well? I mean, let's just be real about it. I mean, how many bodies, you compare the stack of bodies from one group to another, who's stacking up more people? Like you go and look at how many young men are cut down before they're even at the prime of their youth in those cities over dumb shit. And I think the more people start to ask that question, the more they start walking away from the traditional way they vote. By the way, I'm not telling you to vote for Republicans. I'm just saying that everybody should have to earn your vote. They should have to do more than offer you crumbs to keep you voting that way. And if the only thing they can do is try to scare you into voting because, oh my God, white supremacy. Like, they need you to be afraid. They need you to be racially activated. Because if you're racially activated, like, then you're not thinking about things like, hey, our schools are shit. There's garbage everywhere. There's fucking fentanyl junkies all over the streets. There's needles on the streets. There's crazy people walking around. They need you to be distracted. So that's why when you see a lot of these major issues that come out, like, for instance, what about that whole Jeffrey Epstein thing? Where's all the arrest, man? They said there were all these people on the islands, made a big hoolabah about it. Why hasn't nobody been arrested and prosecuted? You know, think about it. Why is it after all this time, if there were all these elite people like Bill Clinton, who knows, maybe Trump, you know, all these people, all these rich, powerful, like princes from other countries. And by the way, whatever they might have been doing on Epstein Island, think about this one for a second. That is every day in the Middle East. That's just another Tuesday. Someone sleeping with a minor. That's every day in the Middle East. Now, why is it they talked so much about Epstein? But now that, like, shit's gone, who got busted? Just like the whole thing of gin up a race war. You know, people are like, what do you mean ginning up a race war? Imagine how much more unity there would be between different groups of people if you didn't view your neighbors as enemies. I mean, by the way, white people, we got that message just pretty much puked down our throat. Martin Luther King, we're all equal, all this. So I think a lot of white people are already there. They're already like, yeah, whatever. I mean, people are people. So you ask yourself, why do the Democrats have to keep you effectively fighting a boogeyman of white supremacy? And the answer is fairly simple. They won't get reelected if it's based on how their cities have turned out. Their schools are shit. The streets are covered in needles. There's garbage everywhere. There's crime. There's people flash mobbing into stores and stuff. There's people all over the fucking place doing crazy shit. You know? If you had to measure the results of 30 to 50 years of Democrat rule in those places, how would it look? How would it look, man? I think the answer is everybody knows they ain't got a record you want to run on. So they got to scare you with some white supremacy nonsense. Yeah. The moment we all realize we got more similarities is the moment we start noticing who's been trying to keep us apart. Freedomville, like, subscribe.